What's the,
Canto 4, 1332.
1332?
1332.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 14, the story of King Vena. Text number 32.
Yeah. Chapter 13. Chapter 13.
Oh, chapter 13, excuse me. Chapter 13, text 32. Tata sadaya badram te
Tatasaya Bhadram Te
atmanam suprajam ripa
Atmanam Supajam
Supam
ishtaste putrakamasya
Saste Putra Kamasya
putram dasyati yagyabhuk
Putram Dasyati Yajnavo
tata sadaya badram te
Tatasaya Bhadram Te
atmanam suprajam ripa
Atmanam Supajam
ishtaste putrakamasya
Ishtaste Putra
Kamasya
putram dasyati yagyabhuk
Putram Dasyati Yagyavo
Tatasadaya Bhadram Te
Tatasaya Bhadram Te
Atmanam Suprajam
Atmanam
Atmanam
Suprajam Nalpa
Naste Putra Kamesya
Ishtaste Putra Kamasya
Putram Dasyadi Yajnavu
Putram Dasyati Yajnavo Tata Sadaya Bhadram Te
Tatasataya Bhadram Te
Atmanam Suprajam Nalpa
Atmanam Supajam
Ishtasya Te Putra Kamasya
Ishtaste Putra Kamasya
Putram Dasyati Yajnavo
Putram Dasyati Yagyavo
Tatasadaya Bhadram Te
Tata Sadaya Bhadram Te
Atmanam Suprajam Nirpa
Atmanam Suprajam Nalpa
Ishtaste Putra Karmasya
Ishtaste Putra Kamasya
Putram Dasya Yajnavu
Putram Dasyati Yajnavo Tata Sadaya Bhadram Te Atmanam Suprajam Nalpa Ishtaste Putra Kamasya
Putranam Dasyati
Yajnavo
Tata,
Tata,
therefore, sadhaya,
Sadhaya,
execute the sacrifice to get,
execute the sacrifice get,
padram,
Bhadram,
good fortune, fortune,
good fortune,
te,
te,
to you,
to
atmanam,
Atmanam,
your own,
Prabhu,
suprajam,
Suprajam,
good sons,
Susan,
Nripa, O king,
okay,
Ishtaha,
Isha,
being worshipped,
being worshipped
te,
te,
by you,
by you,
Putrakamasya,
Putragamasya,
desiring to have a son,
desiring to have a son,
Putram,
Putra,
a son,
a son,
Dasyati,
Dasyate,
he will deliver,
he would deliver,
Yagyavu,
Yajnavu,
the Lord, the enjoyer of the sacrifice.
The Lord
enjoy
enjoy the
of the
sacrifice.
Translation, O king, we wish all good fortune for you. You have no son, but if you pray at once to the Supreme Lord and ask for a son, and if you execute the sacrifice for that purpose, the enjoyer of the sacrifice, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, will fulfill your desire. There's no purport. You can repeat the English. O king,
O King,
we wish all good fortune for you.
we wish all good fortune for you.
You have no son,
You have no son,
but if you pray at once to the Supreme Lord
but if you pray at once for the Supreme Lord
and ask for a son,
and ask for a son,
and if you execute the sacrifice
and if you execute the sacrifice
for that purpose,
for that purpose,
the enjoyer of the sacrifice,
the enjoyer of the sacrifice,
the Supreme Personality of Godhead,
the Supreme Personality of Godhead,
will fulfill your desire.
will fulfill the desire.
Tata svabhagat, this is text 33. Tata svabhagatyayani gahisyanti divokasa yadyagya purusha saksad apadyaya harirvrita. When Hari, the Supreme Personality, the Supreme Enjoyer of all sacrifices, is invited to fulfill your desire for a son, all the demigods will come with him and take their shares in the sacrifice. Purport, whenever a sacrifice is performed, it's meant for satisfying Lord Vishnu, the enjoyer of the fruits of all sacrifices. And when Lord Vishnu agrees to come to a sacrificial arena, all the demigods naturally follow their master and their shares are offered in such sacrifices. The conclusion is that the sacrifices performed are meant for Lord Vishnu, not for the demigods. I'm going to read the next verse as well. Kamstan kaman harir dadyat yanyan kamayate janaha haratito yatai vaisha tata pungsam palodaya. The performer of the sacrifices under karma kanda activities achieves the fulfillment of the desire for which he worships the Lord. Purport, in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that he awards benedictions to the worshipper according to his desire. The Supreme Personality of Godhead gives all living entities conditioned within this material world full freedom to act in their own way. But to his devotee, he says that instead of working in that way, it's better to surrender unto him, for he will take charge of the devotee. That is the difference between a devotee and a fruitive actor. The fruitive actor enjoys only the fruits of his own activities, but a devotee, being under the guidance of the Supreme Lord, simply advances in devotional service to achieve the ultimate goal of life, to go back home, back to Godhead. The significant word in this verse is kaman, which means sense gratificatory desires. A devotee is devoid of all kaman. He is anya bilasita shunya. A devotee is always devoid of all desires for sense gratification. His only aim is to satisfy or gratify the senses of the Lord. That's the difference between a karmi and a devotee. So here, King Anga, desiring to have a son. Well, this is usual for the royal dynasties. They want to have offspring, especially male offspring. And we see in the history of England also the King Henry VIII. He went to extreme measures to have offspring. He got married to a Catholic princess, and she couldn't produce a son, only a daughter, so he divorced. In order to divorce, he had to give up being a Catholic. He changed up to Protestant, and he was, this way he founded the Anglican Church, which is the sort of Church of England, as it's called. Then, he got involved, I guess, with one of her maidservants or something like that, and she couldn't produce a son, so he had her head cut off. Then a third wife got married. I think she had a son, but the son was weak. He wasn't very, and the wife died either in childbirth or shortly after. Then he got married again to get, trying to get stronger son, and that wife he didn't like very much, so he divorced her, and then he had another wife. And she didn't produce a son. He had her head cut off. And the sixth wife, I think she produced a daughter, and then he died before her. So they say, divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. That's how they remember, how he treated his six wives. He's so desperate for male offspring that eventually that boy, succeeded him on the throne, but the boy died very young. The throne passed to an elder daughter, and then she died and passed to a younger daughter, and she never married, she never had any offspring, so then that was the end of the dynasty. It was transferred over to some, more distant relatives. So yes, these kings very desperate, for offspring. We know also the story of Chitraketu. Chitraketu, he was a, great king actually. He was actually a devotee, great devotee, Chitraketu. He had many wives, but he couldn't produce any son. So then the great sages, I think Narada and Angira, visited his palace, and he served them very nicely, and he begged them for the benediction that he could get his son. So they gave him the benediction, but Narada told him this son will be the source of great happiness and also great distress for you. He couldn't understand what was distress. Why would I be distressed if I have a son? But anyway, time passed, and he was very affectionate to his wife, the one that produced the son, and he was neglecting the other wives, and they became jealous. They grouped together, decided to poison the child. So they poisoned the child. So, from great jubilation, when he first had the son, the whole mood in the palace was changed to great lamentation because the boy died. And then Narad Muni and Angir Muni returned, and he requested, please bring this boy back to life. So they brought the boy back to life, and King Chitraketu was, overjoyed. Oh, my son, my son. And the boy was looking at him in confusion. In which birth was I your son? He said. And then he gave some short philosophical instructions, then he left again. So this had a very profound effect on King Chitraketu, and he realized that everything temporary in this material world, and we should not become overly, attached to making material arrangements. We should rather absorb ourselves in devotional service of the Lord, because that's the nature of material life. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Matra sparsastra konti asitoshna sukha dukkada agamo paino nitas kamsta tikshasva bharata. The non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of the winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So, this is very clear instruction from Krishna, and this is the reality that, sometimes there's heat, sometimes there's cold. Of course, here in Malaysia you don't get cold much, but still you get heavy rains, great heat, and heavy rains, lightning, lightning is flashing in the sky. Sometimes it strikes a building or a person or a car or animal and kills someone or causes great damage. So this unpredictable nature of the material energy in like Western countries, Europe, Russia, you get warm, hot summers and very cold winters. Often there's snow, at least in Russia there's snow so often, can be 6 months a year, snow. So it's a bit distressful, the cold. Of course they have good heating in the buildings and warm clothes, but still it restricts one's activities, and if you don't have proper heating, you can easily leave your body due to the cold. So it's just the nature of the material world. So that, and we do things, sometimes, activities bring us happiness, and sometimes they bring us distress. Unexpectedly, suddenly there's some distress. So like that, always changing situation in the material world. So King Chitraketu was enlightened then by that episode of having a son and then losing his son. So he could experience great jubilation and great distress also. So here anyway, King Anga, he's actually a very pious king. Actually a very pious king, and he is very respectful of the Brahmanas, follows their instructions, and they're advising him to offer oblations to the Lord, and perform sacrifice under their guidance. And so he does it, and as a result, he got a child. It was a most amazing yajna. The oblations were offered in a fire, and a person appeared from the fire altar wearing a golden garland and a white dress. He was carrying a golden pot filled with rice boiled with milk. Well, this shows that Brahmanas were very expert, that their sacrifice could produce such a result. Not only that, but the milk, was given to the king. He smelled it and he offered a portion to his wife. And just by eating that food, she was able to conceive a child. by her husband. So in this way, I had a child, but of course the story goes on. Unfortunately, the child had not good qualities because his mother actually was born in the dynasty of irreligion. The father of the mother was death personified. So this was not auspicious actually. How come that he got such a wife since he was such a great king? Prabhupada says sometimes the Lord arranges an unfortunate wife for his devotee. So that gradually, due to family circumstances, the devotee becomes detached from his wife and home and makes progress in devotional life. It appears that by the arrangement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, King Anga, although a pious devotee, got an unfortunate wife like Sunita and later on a bad child like them, because the son often takes on the characteristics of the mother and the daughter and the characteristics of the father. So, but the result was he got complete freedom from the entanglement of family life and left home to go back to Godhead. Yeah, that was his conclusion. As the boy grew up, the boy was very cruel. He would even kill his school friends, childhood friends, as if they were animals meant for slaughter. The king tried to punish him in different ways to reform him, but he was unable to do so. Then he thought persons who have no son are certainly fortunate. They must have worshipped the Lord in their previous lives so that they would not have to suffer the unbearable unhappiness caused by a bad son. A sinful son causes a person's reputation to vanish. His irreligious activities at home cause irreligion and quarrel among everyone, and this creates only endless anxiety. So, he was thinking like that, and he finally thought a bad son is better than a good son, because a good son creates attachment for home, whereas a bad son does not. A bad son creates a hellish home from which an intelligent man actually becomes easily detached. So like that, he couldn't sleep at night, and he lost interest in household life. And then in the middle of the night, he got up from his bed, left his wife, and gave up all attraction for his kingdom and went to the forest. He took the renounced order of life. So the citizens, the sages, everyone was agreed. They tried to search for the king, but they couldn't find him. So the citizens then offered obeisances to the sages and informed them they couldn't find the king anywhere. So then the story, of course, continues how the sages made his son the king in due course. But the son was, very impious. And he said that the king is a representative of the Lord, so you should worship the king. And then he stopped the Brahmanas from performing yagyas, from worshipping the demigods, stopped people from worshipping the Brahmins and donating to the Brahmins. In this way, he, disturbed the whole functioning of the Vedic society, Varnashram society, and all kinds of inauspicious events took place in the kingdom. And the Brahmanas warned him, rectify yourself. Okay, the king is representative of the Lord, but so are the Brahmanas. You have to respect the Brahmanas, listen to their advice, and be a humble servant. You may be the king, but you have to also realize you're not the supreme personality of God. But he was thinking that he is practically the supreme being. So he went on with his, wrong behavior, as a result of which the Brahmins had decided, this is too much. They cursed him and he died. And of course then they churned his body somehow, and all his sinful reactions came out in the form of a black dwarf-like personality called Nishada. Nishada means sit down. But, they told that black personality, sit down and don't disturb. And then they turned the body more, and Prithu Maharaj came out with his hunter Archie. So in this way, the Supreme Lord appeared as a Saktavesh avatar. Prithu Maharaj is a Saktavesh avatar. He's not a Vishnu Tattva. Once the artists were painting pictures of Prithu Maharaj and they were putting halo around his head, and Prabhupada said, no halo, he's a Jiva, he's a Saktavesh avatar. The halo only you put on the Vishnu Tattva incarnations of the Lord. So anyhow, this is the nature of material life. Even someone is a good person, he's a pious person, and he's a generous person, still he, different difficulties may befall him, and it may cause him to become, very renounced. He'll take it in that way. He'll take it out of time, to move on from this inauspicious situation, just like the king here. He had hope for the best. He was a well-wisher of the citizens. He was, greatly respectful to the Brahmanas, but somehow it came out like that. Bad son and inauspicious situation. In Srila Prabhupada's case, as we know, he was very sincere follower of his Gurudev, wanting to, spread Krishna consciousnss all over the world, but he was entangled in family life, and he wanted his wife to really assist him in that activity, preaching, but she was not at all inclined. He would have some preaching programs, and his wife would just stay, elsewhere, drinking tea. He had 5 children, Prabhupada. Also, first son was, something went wrong, didn't work out. I think left home and in unfortunate circumstances. He had 4 more children. And he was a very beautiful householder. He worked hard, in his business to support his family, and his hope that they would be nice devotees. And some of them became devotees. Vrindavan Day, I know, I met him when we were on Library Party. He used to also distribute sets of Prabhupada's books. So he was a, devotee. But another son, elder than him, Madan Mohan, after Prabhupada's departure, he tried to sue ISKCON and the BBT, claiming it's all his property. So there was some court case, and finally it was settled out of court. So this is the thing, that family life can lead to all kinds of complications. And Prabhupada's wife, she took his Bhagavatam and she sold it to get money for tea biscuits. She liked to drink tea. So was an English habit, I guess. although tea come from India, but I guess it was the British who introduced it. And people became very, addicted to this tea drinking. It is still very common in the world. In Malaysia also, people drink tea. Yeah. Well, maybe it's a hangover from British time, I don't know, but anyway, this is, something which the Vaishnavas don't do. Well, they might take some herbal tea, but not ordinary tea, which has some caffeine, I think, in it, or some kind of... I know when we taking the taxi from Vrindavan to Delhi, or from Mayapur to Calcutta, the drivers, they always have to stop and drink tea. Absolutely. I've never been on such a journey with a driver didn't stop and drink tea. Because he say it helps it keep them awake. So anyhow, Prabhupada decided, he said to his wife, you have to choose tea or me. And she said, well, maybe she was joking, but she said, I guess I'll have to choose tea. But he took it seriously and he left home. Actually, there's some memories I read of Prabhupada's, I think godbrother Srila Maharaj. He was interviewed by one of my god sisters. She produced that book, of interviews with different people, people who knew Prabhupada before he went to the West. So, godbrothers, disciples of godbrothers, Brijbasis, inhabitants of Vrindavan. So, Prabhupada actually, he rented 2 houses in, I think, Sita Banerjee Road, what's the name? Sita Banerjee Road, something like that, in Calcutta. So one house, his family lived, and in the other house, downstairs he had his, medicine laboratory for producing medicine, and upstairs he gave the space to godbrothers and their followers to come and hold programs, and he also would attend programs. So, and he wanted his family to, but they didn't like to. But he himself, he was very absorbed in Krishna consciousness. At the same time, he was trying to do his business. So the godbrothers were living in the next house upstairs, and once in the night, Prabhupada came and banging on the door that I had a dream of my Guru Maharaj and telling me to take sannyas, and I want to take sannyas, and he asked Sridhar Maharaj, give me sannyas immediately. And Sridhar Maharaj said, hold on a minute, take it easy. Because he didn't want to upset, Prabhupada's family, the Prabhupada extended family, they're respectable people, and, he was preaching to them, cultivating them, so he didn't want to upset them. He said, wait for some time. And anyway, he said, I don't want to give you sannyas because of my relation with your family members. Better you would take from Keshav Maharaj, who was staying in Mathura at the time, in the, what's that mat called? Chaitanya Saraswat? No, that's Sridhar Maharaj's mat, Chaitanya Saraswat mat. I can't remember. In Mathura, Keshav Maharaj. Anyway, Prabhupada went back and carried on with his family life for the time being. Again, after some time, again in the night there was banging on the door, and Sridhar Maharaj, Prabhupada asked him, give me sannyas. And he said, I have dreams of my Guru Maharaj. Take sannyas. And again he tried to kind of pacify him, So Abai, as he was known, Prabhupada, went back to his house and then he just left everything. He left without any luggage or money or anything. And he renounced family life. So, it was disappointment. He worked hard and hoped his family would all be devotees, but he said my wife was a devotee, but she didn't like preaching. She liked his, we worship the deity, offer some food to the deity like that. So, he had hoped they would really help him in preaching and one of his children also to do like that. But it didn't all work out, so that disappointment was impetus. And it caused him to take sannyas, which of course ended up being very beneficial for the whole world and very beneficial for us as he traveled all over the world and preached Krishna consciousness and inspired so many people to become devotees. Previously, his godbrothers had gone to the West, but they had returned unsuccessfully. And actually, there's an interview with another person in that book. What's his name now? Nayananda Das Brahmachari, I think. He was a pujari at Champahati. Champahati is one of the holy places on the Navadip Mangal Parikrama. So, there was a temple there, and whenever Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur went on Navadip Mangal Parikrama, he especially developed it, in accordance with the guidelines given by his father, Bhaktivedanta Thakur, who wrote Navadip Dham Mahatmya. He had researched all the holy places. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati began that parikrama and visiting all those holy places. So this Brahmanji describes that we were there at Champahati. It was a very big parikrama group, thousands of people. There were hundreds of tents that were pitched in a land in front of the temple at Champahati. And there was a program, at that program, one of the sannyasis who had gone to the West, he came back, so he was welcomed back. And then in the lecture, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said, I will not hesitate to spend, unlimited amount of blood in the form of the resources of the Gaudiya Math to spread Krishna consciousness in the Western world. And Nayananda of Ramji was standing over on his left. And then Bhaktisiddhanta, he was looking at beyond him to somebody else. And he said, I predict that in the future, one of my disciples will go to the West and he'll bring the whole world to Mayapur. And so Nayananda was wondering, who's he looking at? And he turned around and said, Abai Babu, Prabhupada. So in this way, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he could understand that Srila Prabhupada, he was a very sincere disciple. And he had given that instruction just on the first meeting to Prabhupada and his friend. You are intelligent young men, you should take this Krishna consciousness and spread it all over the world. So Prabhupada always meditated on that instruction, even when he was in a family life. And he told him, preach Krishna. Later he also wrote a letter just before Srila Bhaktisiddhanta disappeared, that I'm a householder, I can't serve you intimately like the sannyasis and brahmacharis, but please tell me the best way that I can serve you. And he got the reply just a few months before Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati disappeared. Preach Krishna consciousness in English language and spread it all over the world. So as we know, after that in the 40s, Prabhupada began producing Bhakti Godhead, he would write, very topical articles, depending on the, situation in the world. It was during the war. He started that it was a newspaper, Back to God, and he kept on publishing it until he, went to the West, and then he was making a color magazine, Back to God. At some stage, the distribution was a million copies a month. So, anyway, that was a prediction of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And also, not so long before Bhaktisiddhanta's departure, Prabhupada moved to Bombay, and he was helping his godbrothers there to establish a center. And then Bhaktisiddhanta came once, and the godbrothers requested, make Abai Prabhu the president here. But Bhaktisiddhanta said, no need, he will do everything in his own time. Then there was a discussion with, several of his disciples as to who should go to the West for preaching. This was, after the first group had come back, so that, he still desired to send some disciples. And he wanted to send one disciple called Narottam. But Narottam said, please, Gurudev, I cannot bear the separation from you. I don't want to go to the West. So then he looked at Abai. He said, Abai Prabhu will do it. So he knew, this person, this disciple, Abai Charavinda Das, as he was known, he has the intelligence, he has the desire, he has the determination to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. So there were, upsets there for Prabhupada in family life, but that turned, a great devotee takes the difficulties as an impetus, and that ultimately enabled him to retire from family life, to fully focus on translating books, producing Back to Godhead, preaching, and preparing himself, and then eventually going to the West and spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world. Not only he spread it, nice, huh? How the sunlight is shining on the deity, Radharani's face, huh? So, yes, we may have to face reverses and difficulties, but we should take it as an arrangement of Krishna, and try to see how we can improve our Krishna consciousness and improve our service to Guru and the Parampara. Okay. Any question, comment?
Maharaj, in this Kali Yuga, do we really need a son?
No, I guess not. It's not essential. Generally, of course, householders would like to have some children that will continue their family lineage and also bring joy and happiness to the house. Children are, generally, quite charming and, auspicious. They're hearing their, small voices and so forth, and their playful activities. But, ultimately, one just has to accept the mercy of the Lord. Some householders aren't able to have children, and they go on serving Krishna to the best of their ability. And some persons don't enter householder life, and they don't have the children, so Not everybody has to have children. But generally for householders, it's the recommended path.
Thank you so much, Maharaj, for your wonderful class. Maharaj, I have a questions like Maharaj Anga, he was very pious king. So he knows the injunction of the Shastra, he knows in and out. So Maharaj, he was not having son. So, but he knows, because he knows the injunction of Shastra, so he could understand this is the desire of Lord. Why he wanted to forcefully to have son, then Bena come and all this happened. So Maharaj,
Well, it's generally the duty of the royal family to produce offspring, to produce son and train the son to become the next king. So it's kind of obligation, if you like, of the Kshatriya royal families. So he was just trying to fulfill that as a duty to the Lord, to the society. And we see, this chapter is called The Descendants of Dhruva Maharaj. Anga is one of the descendants. But earlier in the chapter, there's some description of the very lineage of Dhruva Maharaj and the names of the different kings. So it's generally the tradition and that's required of the king to produce offspring. So that's why. Yeah. You want to carry
In a
on?
family?
with this
No,
point?
Maharaj.
Okay, yeah.
In a family that don't have any son, can the daughters do the last wish for the parents?
That's a very technical question. I'm not- one of you better answer that. One of you answer that. Can one of you answer that?
We have pastime of Lord Mother Sita from the Srila on behalf of Lord Ram.
What did she do?
She offered Pinda on behalf of
She did. Mhm. What is it normally in a Hindu society? What happens? Some other male relative in there. Yeah. Okay. That's usually what happens. They'll put Sita Devi as a special person.
Yeah.
Maharaj, if you don't mind to share some of your interaction with Srila Prabhupada. So that
That's a long topic. Isn't it?
few, if one and two.
When I went preaching in Bangladesh, and we had to leave Bangladesh because there was a shooting incident in Mayapur, and it got in the newspapers in Bangladesh, and the government told us to leave the country in case people wanted to retaliate against the Western devotees, because the director of National Security, he showed us all these newspaper clippings like cruel foreign Vaishnavas shoot the timid Muslim villagers. The Muslim attacked the temple, and the devotee just fired some pellet guns in the air to scare them. But they made a police report, and devotees were arrested, they were put in handcuffs, they were paraded through Navadvip streets, big group of devotees in handcuffs, like criminals arrested, like a gang of criminals. And it was on the front page of all the newspapers in India, and they got front page of all the newspapers in Bangladesh also. So this mainly Muslim country, we were having big programs there, so they, some of them might have attacked us, so the director of security, he said, go out of the country, he gave us a letter, leave the country in 7 days. We came to Mayapur, and I discussed with Jagat Thakuraj, who was just being made to GBC, and few months earlier, and I asked him, I said I would like to try and open a temple in Nepal. So he gave me a letter for Prabhupada's secretary, explaining about our preaching in Bangladesh and how we wanted to open the center in Nepal. So the Prabhupada called me, it was August 77, he was very sick. I never saw him, so sick. He was sitting in a rocking chair upstairs on his balcony, and looked very, very thin and big dark glasses. But then he had heard the letter. Tamal Krishna Maharaj read it out to him, so he was pleased that he's pleased that we had been preaching in Bangladesh. And then he said, once there was a Bengali poet called Michael Madhusudan Datta. He was a Christian, I think, quite well-known Bengali poet. Have you heard of him?
Yeah.
Michael Madhusudan Datta. He went to England, and he squandered all his money. I think he was drinking and whatever. And then he was begging from a Hindu gentleman, please help me, please help me. No one was giving. Finally, one gentleman called Vidyasagar lent him some money, but the Vidyasagar was thinking, well, he might pay back or not. Never mind, he's a big man, he's a famous person. Let me help him. So he gave him some money, I lent him some money. And the poet, he glorified him. He said, you have the courage of an Englishman and the heart of a Bengali mother. So then Prabhupada said that, you are from the Englishman family. And actually I'm from Northern Ireland. But anyway, my grandfather's from England. And it's, British. Northern Ireland is part of UK. It's British. So he said the British had the empire all over the world. They were famous for their courage and expansion and enthusiasm. And he said, even America is your creation. USA, it's English people that went there, and colonized the place. So the Pilgrim Fathers, they're called the Pilgrim Fathers. They were Quakers. It's a very austere sect of Protestantism. I guess they were being persecuted a bit, so they all went to North America. And they founded, they gradually developed the place. I mean, of course, you have to be careful of the language that we use nowadays. I mean, there were people there already, Red Indian people, and these people, other people came from England, and they started, colonizing, and eventually, these colonizers began, killing the native inhabitants. It was all still an issue nowadays. Anyhow, Prabhupada said, even America is your creation. He said, but we have got better business, he said, to expand the empire of Krishna consciousness. He said, you have two nice preaching fields, Bangladesh and Nepal. So he said, you expand the empire of Krishna consciousness, do with the courage of an Englishman and the heart of a Bengali mother. And then there was more discussion because I was, in the letter Dr. Maharaj has mentioned, I was thinking to go to the West and collect some money, because in Nepal, to stay in the country for foreigners, you had to extend your visa every month, and you had to show that you changed $150. So there was some foreign currency coming in, the country was benefiting. So I thought we'll need money, 600. I was taking 3 other Westerners with me, plus one Nepali boy. So we needed about $600 a month. But property, he said, no need to go to the West. He said, ISKCON has money, I have money. He said, how much you need? I said, $600 a month. He said, you open a bank account in Kathmandu, I'll send the money every month. And which he did, actually, and it continued quite some time some years after Prabhupada's departure from his Guru Dakshin, which was in a trust called Mayapur Vrindavan Trust. Prabhupada created it so that, there'd always be some income for supporting the deities if there were difficult times. But he also gave grants and loans to temples from the interest. Like I guess Bhubaneswar gave different centers. Actually, we later got some money also for Nepal for buying land. And anyway, the conversation continued because we wanted also to go back to Bangladesh, but we thought we'd go back, undercover. And we had been in contact with one publisher, book publisher, and he had given some quotation for printing Bengali books in Bangladesh. So the idea was that BBT in America would send a foreign currency, and we print the books there and keep half of them for distribution in Bangladesh and send the other half to India. And this way we would apply for visas for two devotees to come as like businessmen to supervise this printing of books. So we, Prabhupada approved it. He said, yes, we will invest in, you print the books there and give some to India. So like that, he invested in those countries actually to begin and develop the preaching. And then at the end he said, take the courage of an Englishman and the heart of a Bengali mother. So that's the last thing Prabhupada said to me. Okay.
One question for you.
Yes.
How you apply the courage of the Englishman and the heart of the Bengali?
Look, I don't know. I just try to, follow the instruction as best I can. The courage of an Englishman, Prabhupada said, the courage of an Englishman and the heart of the Bengali mother. But the instruction was to spread the empire of Krishna consciousness. So try to, expand Krishna consciousness. So we, like that, began developing them in Nepal, Bangladesh, and then gradually also came here. I told a long detail in Kulim the other night. They asked me to give a lecture about the history of ISKCON Malaysia, how, actually I wanted to ask Prabhupada, after opening a center in Nepal, I'd gone to Vrindavan. Prabhupada was very ill. I hoped to give him a report and ask also permission to come here, but he was too sick and couldn't. And then we were sent back to our temple, back to Nepal. And then after a few weeks we heard Prabhupada left his body, so we came again. They had already made a small Samadhi mandir. And I recall that at the time, our Malaysia Maharaj, Bhakti-Vijayananda Maharaj, he was a temple commander in Vrindavan. And, I knew him well. We used to do travel and Sankirtan together in England. He joined in England. He was a student there. So we were, one evening we were sitting just outside Prabhupada's Samadhi, just in front. The small mud Samadhi. The Pujari offered the last artik, and then Prabhupada's garland fell. We were talking about, opening a center in Malaysia, Maharaj and myself. So the Pujari came and gave us a garland. So, well, we took it as Prabhupada's blessings like that. So yeah, like that, just tried to go to different countries and find some devotees who were interested to help and, gradually expand. Then went to Myanmar also, Thailand, Myanmar also, began preaching Krishna consciousness in those places. So I wouldn't say I'm a very courageous person, but anyway, tried to do it, follow Prabhupada's instruction, and heart of Bengali mother, I guess, tried to be kind to the devotees, not always hammering on their heads, but bossing them all the time, but try to be, kind and encourage them in that way. Yes, Hare Krishna. Jai Grandras Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaur Prabhupada.